The events began as small disturbances. It was late autumn, and the crisp air left a slight frost on the garden at dawn. My backyard had always been my sanctuary, a place of order, tranquility, and a personal sense of safety. But that week, something began to shift. It started one morning when I noticed something unusual. The garden gnome, usually stationed by the rose bushes, was tipped over and slightly displaced. A bird feeder that I always took care to keep upright hung askew, swinging even though there was no breeze. I didn't think much of it at first. Probably the wind, I muttered, though the stillness of the day offered no such excuse. As I ventured closer to the flower beds, something else caught my eye. Muddy footprints. Large and clearly defined, they trailed across the yard from the edge of the garden to the patio. They didn't look like they came from any of my neighbors or their pets. They were human, and they didn't lead back to the gate. The prints just stopped abruptly, as though whoever left them had vanished. A sense of unease gnawed at me. Maybe the gardener, I thought, but I hadn't hired anyone that week. I shook it off, locking the garden gate tightly before heading inside. By evening, the atmosphere in the yard felt heavier. The garden lights, which I had installed just weeks before, began to flicker. Not random flashes, but a steady, deliberate rhythm. I stood at the window, watching the faint glow dance across the lawn. A chill ran through me. It wasn't just the cold. Something felt wrong. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, determined to inspect the area. The air was unnervingly still, the silence deafening. My footsteps sounded unnaturally loud as I made my way to the trellis where the footprints had disappeared earlier. That's when I saw them, scratches etched into the wooden frame. They were thin but deep, too high for an animal to have made them. I ran my fingers over the grooves, trying to make sense of it. Maybe kids playing a prank? I muttered aloud, though I didn't entirely believe it. I went back inside, drawing the curtains tightly and double-checking every lock. As I settled into bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The garden was always a source of calm for me, but now it felt like a portal for something unwelcome. The next morning, things escalated. The garden gate, which I had locked the night before, was wide open. The muddy footprints were back, trailing all the way to the sliding glass door. This time, smudged handprints joined them, pressed against the lower part of the glass as if someone or something had tried to peer inside. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't normal. I checked the locks again, adding a safety bar to the door for good measure. My nerves were frayed, but I convinced myself it was just a coincidence, until night fell. That night I stayed in the living room, curled up on the couch with the lights dimmed. I tried to distract myself with a book, but my mind kept wandering to the events in the yard. Around midnight, the familiar flicker of the garden lights caught my eye. This time, they didn't pulse, they died completely. I crept to the window, peeking out through a small gap in the curtain. The yard was pitch black, save for the faint glow of the moon. Then, I saw movement, a shadow slipping between the trees. It wasn't a raccoon or a stray dog. The figure was upright, human. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I fumbled for my phone, ready to call the police. But before I could dial, a loud thud echoed from the back of the house. I turned, heart racing, and saw the handle of the sliding glass door jiggling violently. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a heavy candlestick, and positioned myself behind the kitchen counter. The jiggling stopped, replaced by a chilling silence. I didn't dare move. Moments later, a low creak echoed from the backyard. I mustered the courage to glance out the kitchen window, and there it was, a ladder propped against the side of the house, leading up to the second-floor bedroom window. I panicked, racing upstairs to lock the window. My hands trembled as I slid the latch shut, staring out into the dark yard below. The ladder was still there, but the figure was gone, or so I thought. As I turned to leave the room, a faint tapping sound drew my attention back to the window. My breath caught as I saw a face pale and expressionless staring back at me. For a moment, we locked eyes, and then it was gone. The police arrived 15 minutes after my frantic call. By then, the ladder had been taken down, and there was no sign of the intruder. The muddy footprints and smudged handprints were the only evidence left behind. Even now, the memory haunts me. I've moved houses since then, but I never go to bed without checking the locks at least twice. The garden, once my sanctuary, has become a reminder that not all disturbances are as innocent as they first seem.